the matter with you?
No.
You're acting like you're nervous or something.
Well, yeah, I am.
What are you nervous about? I'm the one that's under the gun here. Trial starts tomorrow.
You want to know what I'm nervous about? I'll tell you what I'm nervous about. I am in the dark here with all this legal crap. I have no idea what's going on. All I know is you're screwing up, and I can't help.
You lent me a little camera, didn't you?
Oh, Vinny, I'm watching you go down in flames, and you're bringing me with you, and I can't do anything about it.
And?
Well, I hate to bring it up because I know you got enough pressure on you already. But we agreed to get married as soon as you won your first case. Meanwhile, 10 years later, my niece, the daughter of my sister, is getting married. My biological clock is ticking like this, and the way this case is going, I ain't never getting married.
Lisa, I don't need this. I swear to God, I do not need this right now, okay? I got a judge that's just aching to throw me in jail. An idiot who wants to fight me for $200. Slaughtered pigs. Giant loud whistles. I ain't slept in 5 days. I got no money. A dress code problem. And a little murder case, which in the balance holds the lives of 2 innocent kids. Not to mention your biological clock, my career, your life, our marriage, and let me see, what else could we pile on? Is there any more ish we could pile on to the top of the outcome of this case?
You're listening to the Revolution and Beard Show on AM 1710 Q4 Radio in Chicago. I was going through a couple of stories out of Chile for our guests who just arrived in the studio. Brian's checking on some coffee for one of those fine young gentlemen right now, but I wanted to bring you, I thought this was really interesting because it sort of plays into an alternate perspective. And this goes back to last year's elections, presidential elections in Chile, and an alternate perspective, something that Americans need to start thinking about with regard to their own elections and getting active. Not necessarily when Ms. Bachelet was president from 2006 to 2010. She focused on health care and social welfare programs for the elderly and medical care for pensioners. But she was broadly popular and represented a center-left coalition that held power for 2 decades and had not undermined free market capitalism. She could not run for re-election because Chile's constitution forbids presidents from serving 2 consecutive terms. Wouldn't that be nice here? In 2010, Chileans elected Sebastián Piñera, a conservative businessman and an economist and advocate for free markets. Now it is he who cannot run for re-election, and polls show that Ms. Bachelet on the verge of a crushing victory over Mr. Piñera's preferred successor, Evelyn Mate. Did I say that correctly? Thank you. Whew. No pressure. If Ms. Bachelet wins, the reasons will be likely to have more to do with character, trustworthiness, and historical memory than with economic ideology. Ooh, we could use some of that here. I think my passport's up to date. Yes, it is. Let me relate. Can I get a sponsorship to Chile, please? Let me relate a story from 30 years ago. This is from the author of the story. I was lying on a sunny Pacific beach, having just a swim in the water, so cold that it felt like an electric shock. The people in the water laughed or flailed. Some women stepped into the water gracefully. Others dived right into the waves. That day I saw someone running toward the sea on short, sturdy legs. When he hit the water, he continued like a robot as if there were no waves or cold. And when the water was deep enough, he simply went under. Who is that guy? I asked a friend. Sebastián Piñera, she replied. At the time, Mr. Piñera was an economics professor and banker who had just begun to amass a fortune introducing credit cards to Chile. I think that worked out rather well for you guys, didn't it? No sarcasm here. The determination he showed that day revealed part of the secret behind his ascent to power: sheer strength of will. Sadly, determination and empathy are not the same. Mr. Piñera's economic record: fiscal responsibility, private investment, stable growth, low inflation, new jobs, cheap imports, has been excellent. We'll find out if that's actually the case with our guests here in just a moment. As promised, he has governed like a brilliant CEO, but his shareholders, the voters, are not satisfied. Well, there you go. He has the instincts of a technocrat and makes decisions based on polls. Where have we heard that before? He thinks fast, perhaps too fast. He is shrewd, perhaps too shrewd. He is universally trusted. I think his brother is Rand Paul. One example of Mr. Piñera's seeming callousness in 2011, students of mine, says the writer here, at the University of Chile, were leaving for a demonstration. They felt the rich were running the government. The foxes are in the hen house, one woman told me, with no counterbalance to protect regular people. Also curious. The students were protesting the rapid expansion of private universities, which were promoted as a way to increase college access, but poor quality and financial abuses at these profit-making schools, including the bankruptcy of one of them, Universidad del Mar, soured students and parents on them. Another factor harming Mr. Piñera's legacy is memory. This year was the 40th anniversary of the coup that toppled, thank you, President Nixon, the coup that toppled democratically elected President Salvador Allende and ushered in the brutal dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. What's striking is, and I'm not going to go too much more on this. You can read more on this on revolutionandbeer.com. But I just wanted to sort of conclude this very quickly.
Pretty good setup for what we're going to get into.
I think so. There's a couple other things here that people should know about how to look at their government from the outside in this country, instead of thinking that we are the end all be all of everything on the planet. That said, we've got a couple of great guests here.
We have three great guests actually. And I'm very little signal here. Yeah.
Any better? That would have done it.
Yeah.
The magic button. My bad. So, sorry, I was shuffling around. We finally got these folks in out of the snow, and they have been trekking up from the south side and got caught in some lovely Chicago traffic. So you're getting the authentic experience. Welcome to Chicago.
Yeah.
And cheers and salud. What's a good Chilean?
Salud.
Salud.
That's right. Good. And Melissa will be joining us momentarily. She had to run out for a second. So we're sitting here with Pablo and Gabriel, two of the three people that have traveled here from Chile and are part of the Struggling to Win speaking tour. Mm-hmm. We're really lucky to have you all in Chicago because the weather actually held you back in a couple of places, right? You've missed a few.
It's summer down there. Or actually, you guys are getting into autumn now.
Yeah.
So what the hell is the matter with you coming to Chicago in weather like this?
Yeah.
And we're glad you did.
Whose idea was that?
Yeah, whoever organized the trip, you should find someone else. Just joke.
But it's been a great experience. Anyways,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have this cold in Chile. We don't have this snow, so it's nice to get to see that. So it's a novelty for us. We don't live
Well, before
here.
global warming, you had it up on the mountains, right?
Right.
Well, you look like you adapted very quickly and appropriately. I see lots of layers and some facial hair,
Well, we've been in the U.S. for about a month now, so
right.
we're kind of getting used to that.
Yeah.
And we spent the first week of the tour was in Miami. We were already spoiled with that first week.
Yeah.
So
But
what
then-
brings you to Chicago and the States?
Yeah, we're on a national speaking tour.
Uh-huh.
Talking a bit about what's going on in Chile, especially in the social movements, in particular in the student movement, which has been huge in the past 10 years now.
What is going on in the social movement in Chile, and what do people here in the United States need to know, and why do you think it's important to people in the United States?
Well, I would say at least two things. First of all, the legacy of the dictatorship, as you said before,
Mm-hmm.
it's very important to understand what's going on in Chile right now. The neoliberal policies implemented by the dictatorship are crucial to understand the social conflictivity that has been on the rise in Chile in the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
People are just going out in the streets protesting the privatization of the economy, of all public services.
Schools, and
that's,
schools
yeah,
has been a
schools,
big deal.
healthcare, housing, everything's been privatized in Chile. And that's very important to understand what's going on right now. And also, that's one thing, and that's the legacy of the dictatorship. The other thing is that the progressive so-called social democrat or center-left governments in Chile that were in office from 1991 to 2010, and then they're coming back again because Bachelet, she was already elected. She won the elections. That's important to
Yes.
to
Yeah, I was reading an
say.
old article.
Yeah,
Yep.
probably. I mean, she was elected like a month ago.
Yeah.
in December. And
Was it November or December?
December was
December.
Okay.
And those governments, the progressive government, they just kept the fundamental elements of those neoliberal policies. So they have used a more progressive speech for the same program, right? The same
Yeah,
economic
yeah.
program,
Right, different
and
words,
that's the other reason for that.
And here's exactly, and here's the line that I liked of this that I thought bridged kind of political the political perspective in the United States and how we view everything as being really insular about us, and we view everything through economics. And this is what I like, and I want to get your take on it. As for the political right, it must break more decisively with the Pinochet legacy and abandon its adherence to the notion that economics explains everything about human behavior. According to this article, that is not what Chileans believe. As Hamlet says, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, that are meant of in your philosophy. So that perspective, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that the right wing in Chile has been able to break with the at least with the Pinochet side of the dictatorship.
Yeah.
They're still the same right wing neoliberal conservatives.
Okay.
They have a more liberal wing because in Chile we have the party structure is, I would say, it's very similar to the one in the U.S.
Yeah.
We have like two big coalitions, not just big parties, but coalitions, one in the center left, quote, because they're not really in the left.
Yeah.
For us, they're
Yeah.
just another right wing.
Here we tend to refer to them as liberals.
Yeah, exactly.
And even neoliberal policies
Yeah.
come out of them.
And that's a coalition of parties for democracy that were able to organize the transition to democracy from the dictatorship in a very complex transaction. That's why we call it also a transaction to democracy, not just a transition, because they engaged in this negotiation with the military to create this peaceful transition to democracy while keeping the elements of the neoliberal dictatorship. And so we have that coalition, and we have the right-wing coalition with its more conservative, even fascist at some points,
Objectivist.
wing, and then the more liberal. And some of them still, I don't know, they commemorate the birthday of Pinochet and all that. But that's they show it as if they are just the wingnuts, the crazy people of the left, of
Right.
the right wing, right?
Right. And often that's how political discourse is portrayed in this country in the corporate media is very much going for those extremes or those extreme elements.
Exactly.
So, the theme I understand of your speaking tour is basically people's struggles related to what has happened in Chile and what happened, during and the aftermath of the Pinochet government. So, from a working class perspective for people in Chile, can you kind of talk us through a little bit what happened to different sorts of organized groups, organized labor groups, and things like that were looking out for their own interest, or not looking out for their own interest, but looking out for their communities and working together? What happened to them when Pinochet took over? You speak to that?
Yeah. I'm a student. I'm Gabriel. I'm part of the Libertarian Student Front, meaning libertarians need to explain that it has different meaning
Yes.
in the whole Latin America. It's not the same meaning here. We'll say more the left libertarian or the more anarchist groups. Well, and especially with the students and with other social movement, what would happen after the dictatorship is that we saw a strong repression and a strong dismemberment of all the social movements. We saw people that were tortured, people that were disappeared, people that were killed, in a whole process of making a shock impact within society to stop all the social movement that were demanding more social justice. And with this, there
And that
was
repression
also,
continues.
well, you can see, for example, in the first years of this transition into democracy, that the same tactics, the same elements of the police are still within the police. They're still within all the repressive system. You can still see, for example, in the student marches that have been going in 2011, 2013, people that have been kidnapped by police, people that have been beaten until unconsciousness, people that have been killed. A kid was killed in one of the student marches. In one of the poor neighborhoods of Chile. And these things are still happening within this context. Maybe not so openly and maybe not so publicly about it, but they're still happening. There's still the same tactics.
So can you talk a little bit about the history of student organizing in Chile, or even if you want to just talk about the context and the outlay of it now? Because that's something that is not so intact in the United States that I think is a very important element to radical organizing and a fight for power to represent people. So talk about the student movement in Chile so people get an idea of how that actually plays into this.
Well, student organizing after the dictatorship and with this transition to democracy was trying to rebuild itself as a movement. But at the same time, there was a legacy that the dictatorship left us, a neoliberal system of education that basically left the state out of all responsibility of educating its people and letting private institutions and other type of new institution within a new market of education to actually be the ones that were educating the people with profits, with having bad infrastructure, but only just with the objective to have workforce or maybe more higher schools where you can actually have professionals and bosses coming out. But the idea was to have a system that could have highly profits, people would be involved in that, and having at the same time a large source of workforce and a large source of professionals and all the type. So it was a system that was created to have schools for poor and schools for rich. A very segregating system, and didn't have nothing to be related to education as a right, only as something you could buy or sell.
And there's a new minister of education. Are you seeing? I was going to ask you. I know you already know where I'm going. Are you seeing any appreciable change from the previous the previous
when
minister?
The student movement started in the 90s, after all this rebuilding, they were basically cooptated by these parties of the transition.
Right.
So they basically working with them as a electoral basis for the different elections that were occurring at that moment. But after that, there were students that were starting to organize in a more independent, a more autonomous type of movement. And you can see in those years, the student movements was starting to grow in experience, starting to grow in different issues, and started to organize in a different way, and started to demand, for example, the derogation of the organic constitutional law of education that was put upon by the dictatorship, and also started to organize in trying to see education as something that we call a social right, not something that only needs to be conceived as something that needs to be guaranteed for everyone, but also something that needs to be created and administrated by the people themselves. Yep. So what happened with the ministries of education that has been occurring with the different years? You can see with Bachelet's administration in 2006, there were at least 3 ministers of education that just were obligated to diminish because they were incapacity to actually work with the students, and at the same time their incapacity to actually have any dialogue with the whole social movement that was growing. This because a lot of these parties actually bought schools, actually were within this new market of education. They bought universities. They were actually winning a lot of money, and they were just totally within this idea of having education as something that could be buy and sell. That was their idea. And with the social movement that was growing, they didn't have any capacity to actually maneuver within that context. So what's happening right now is that you have Bachelet once again, but now with this new idea or this new narrative of having free education, of having education as a social right.
Yeah.
But when you see, for example, the Ministry of Education that they're putting forward, you see that she's been involved with a lot of all this business of education through a foundation that actually had a lot of tests and a lot of services given to private institutions. So there's a conflict of interest just at the start of this supposedly to be reforming government of education. So just at that point, at the start point of what's going to be this year, 2014, and the start of the Bachelet administration, you see problems with the student movement, and that's going to bring consequences, and that's going to be reflected in the streets.
So there was really no difference between it was Claudia Pirano, I'm sorry, and who was replaced by Valentina Quiroga. Was there really any real change?
Those are not those are the subsecretary of education. Those are not the ministries.
So sort of nothing. They're sort of nothing.
No, they're very important. They
Okay.
are very centered and within the whole ministry. They're a crucial part, and they have a lot of power within it. And Claudia Perrano was part of this institution that had all this managing and this founding, and that actually had a strong conflict of interest within her husband that actually was part of of buying schools and buying universities. And they changed it right now to reflect going a little more to another level with a foundation that's called Educación 2020, Education 2020. The problem with this foundation and the exhibit of what they're trying to do is that they're trying to exhibit the idea of free education, because free education is actually possible in Chile, in a country that you have a lot of resources and things like that, but also seen through this foundation that has relationship with the Christian Democrats.
Right.
That is part of this coalition that has also been involved with the market of education. So it is a turnout, I would say, a little bit to the left, but it's in first term, it's not a win of the student movement, though the students had a lot of critiques of Claudia Pierano. But at the same time, it's just a remolding because of the situation. It's basically just saying we can't be so neoliberal at this moment. We're just going to change a little bit our faces.
Right. I have, because we're coming up to the end of the show. We tried everything we could do to keep you from getting here. We couldn't get the polar bears into the streets, unfortunately. But I have a show coming up called the People's Radio Hour, in which I turn over the radio to people uncensored. You get to say whatever you want. I don't know what kind of time you have.
That means that this program is censored?
No, I don't censor. I'm the manager of the
Yeah.
station. I don't censor anybody.
Yeah.
But
no F-bombs, is basically the standard 7 terms.
exactly.
that kind of stuff, but-
You can't swear. You can say ass, but that's fine.
Hell.
And if somebody's really being a dick, Cheney, you could say that too. But if you guys are interested, take over the microphone for the next hour. We'll do a quick break. We'll come back. You guys take over the microphone. We're not going to jump in. It's all you guys, and then we can share that with you. You can use it however you like. Post it wherever you like. But if you're interested in that, the hour's yours.
And he'll be here to.
I'll work the board.
if you want to.
So all you guys have to worry about is content.
But
exactly what you want to say, exactly the way you want to say it.
So if you guys want to take a minute to think about that, that's fine.
Yeah.
Will we go into a break now? Is it the idea? Because I'd like to talk a little bit more with him.
Let's do a quick break, but
Okay.
we're actually, we're at 53, so we're sort of at the end of the show. So maybe we'll be back with our guests, and they'll run the next hour of the People's Radio Hour. If not, then we're sort of out. But I'm going to have. Chavez, I think I said that right, is going to play us out here. This has been the Revolution and Beer Show. Guys, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much for coming up.
The People's Radio Hour is next. And coming up after that, an all-new Celia and Eric show. This is AM 1710, Q4 Radio in Chicago.
QUE4.org.
Well said. right, we're going to finish this up here. We just got a couple last quick things to worry about with our guests here. You are listening to the Revolution and Beer Show. The last couple of minutes, and you were going to tell them about the event tonight.
Yeah, and there are no worries here. We're feeling good. And again, thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Gabrielle, Melissa, and Pablo, for coming in and fighting the weather. And thank you very much, Heather, for driving them here.
Thank you.
That's awesome. She got them here safely and has been their guide through the Chicago streets of winter. These folks are speaking tonight. There's so much that we did not touch on.
Yes.
This is part of tonight is the last event of a 3-event tour.
Yeah.
They speaking on different topics related to winning autonomy and winning justice, winning policy, winning everything that could mean something to working class people. They're here to share these ideas with you and their experiences with you.
And I did put them a little bit on the spot.
Yeah.
If they wanted to do an hour, but their schedule.
Well, we're
is really tight,
so gracious. We're so glad that they were able to make it. We wanted to make that offer to them, and they have a busy day ahead of them. They need to get home and chill a little bit before they get to their event tonight, which is coming up at 6 p.m. From 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at Quilombo Cultural Center. This is 1757 North Kimball in Chicago. Childcare will be provided. We're asking for a donation, and believe me,
I'll have to go out and get a kid.
You're going to want to, not donating your kid necessarily, but you're going to want to donate a little bit. These folks are here from Chile. They're braving the Chicago winter. They're here to share and work and swap ideas and organize with us as we try to build a global working class movement. That's something that I firmly believe in very strongly. I think my buddy WC here is probably behind me with that too.
No, not at all.
Yeah, well, we got problems. We'll talk about that on the next show. But anyway, again, tonight, 6 p.m. This is the title of this talk is "Struggling to Win a Free Society: Student and Labor Organizing, Social Centers, and the Arts in Chile." And it's going to be the presentations will be given by Pablo, Gabrielle, and Melissa, who are our guests here today. And that's at the Colombo Cultural Center at 1757 North Kimball, Chicago, Illinois, which is a fantastic capoeira school. I am partial to it because I participate in it, but you should show up there and support this whole community. So thank you very much, guys.
There's also a blog about the tour. It's chilespeakingtour.wordpress.com. You can find all the dates because
Beautiful.
we're touring the country. We're heading to the West Coast later. And
It's warm there.
also there's a
They don't have water.
there's a Facebook page also. It's struggling to win.
Okay.
Yep, and
we'll get that up on our social media.
I am posting the WordPress page right now on Facebook, and all this information is at revolutionandbeer.com. You can hit us up at info@revolutionandbeer.com, or you can hit us up on Facebook. Tell us that you think we're asses. Tell us that you don't like what we said. Argue
Hey, you're
with
an
us,
ass.
whatever you want. We're going to keep this going, and we'll be back. I'll be back next weekend, I think.
No, you won't. You're fired. The People's Radio Hour is next. Thanks,
Well, that
guys.
makes it easy.